Hello, this is a revision video on Neutral Tones by Thomas Hardy, and it's for the AQA GCSE poetry syllabus. As ever with any of these videos, they're designed to be a few interesting, hopefully, notes, and they're not designed to be a comprehensive guide. Your own interpretations are always going to be more convincing to an examiner than the interpretations of somebody else. I'm going to read the poem through and give a few brief notes that you can supplement with the things that you've been taught in class. So the poem. Neutral tones. We stood by a pond that winter day, and the sun was white as though chidden of God, and a few leaves lay on the starving sod. They had fallen from an ash, and were grey. Your eyes on me were as eyes that rove over tedious riddles of years ago, and some words played between us to and fro, on which lost the more by our love. The smile on your mouth was the deadest thing, alive enough to have strength to die, and a grin of bitterness swept thereby, like an ominous bird a wing. Since then, keen lessons that love deceives, and rings with wrong have shaped to me your face and the God-cursed sun and a tree, and a pond edged with greyish leaves. So what's the poem all about? It's a poem where the narrator is reflecting on his relationship and the moment of its disintegration. The couple are standing by a pond in winter and they're exchanging a few words, but this significant moment stays with the narrator when he thinks about the downsides of love and the lessons that he's learned from that relationship. A few brief notes on context. Hardy is a Victorian and a modernist poet and novelist. He wanted to write poetry principally, but found that writing novels was more lucrative and earned him more money. And it was only in his later years of writing that he was fully able to write poems without having to rely on his novels. He was born in 1840 and died in 1928, and therefore he spanned a period of massive change, writing as a Victorian writer, but also then as a modernist writer, and surviving and living through the First World War. So he survived a period of intense change in Great Britain. This poem in particular was written in 1867, but was published more than 20 years later in a volume of poetry called Wessex Poems. Hardy was married to Emma Gifford in 1874. So this poem isn't necessarily about Emma because they only met in 1870. Their relationship over time became very unhappy, and eventually they were leading almost separate lives, with Emma living upstairs in the attic of their house and Hardy living a very separate life downstairs. When Emma died, Hardy wrote many poems recollecting their earlier love and courtship and his grief at her death. And they're in his poems 1912 to 13, they're really beautiful and moving images of his grief about her death and the way that he felt about her when they first met. When Hardy died in 1928, it was decided that he would be buried in Poets' Corner, which is a special part of Westminster Abbey. However, his heart is buried with Emma in Stinsford, Dorset, in St Martin's churchyard. There is an interesting rumour about his heart, and as it was being taken out to be buried, the doctor who was doing this had a cat, and it's rumoured that the cat ran off with the heart for a little while. I'm not sure how true that is. In the poem Neutral Tones, it's interesting to look at the title first of all. Neutral implies a sense of being in the middle of something, not wanting to come down on either side. It could suggest that it's dull, emotionless, colourless. Tones could be suggesting tone of voice, a sentiment or a feeling, or it could be suggesting colours as well. Neutral means you should be in the middle, neither positive or negative, but actually as you read the poem I feel that it comes across more negative than positive with this interaction between the couple. We stood by a pond that winter day is interesting in that it suggests no movement for the couple. This relationship isn't going anywhere. They're standing, they're not moving, and even the water they're standing by is a still example of water. It's a pond. It's not flowing. The water isn't going anywhere. The couple aren't going anywhere. And metaphorically, the relationship isn't going anywhere. And the sun was white as though chidden of God. The sun being white suggests it's almost been bleached. It's got connotations along with the winter theme of cold and ice, reflecting the coldness within the relationship. The sun being chidden of God suggests that it's been scolded or told off or rejected by God, which immediately gives you a very melodramatic, dark sense of setting for this couple and this relationship. And a few leaves lay on the starving sod. So the ground is probably quite hard. If it's winter, it might be frosty, and you've just got a sense of things being sparse, of not having very much around, and the ground being dark as well. The leaves had fallen from an ash and were grey. So an ash is a type of tree, but actually in this context you can look at it as well as seeming like the remnants of a fire. So something that's burned away and it's just the parts of the fire and the dust that's left behind. The word grey, again, emphasising how dispassionate and colourless this relationship is. You might want to think as well about the language that Hardy is using. So he's using lots of monosyllabic, one syllable, that is, words in that first stanza in particular, which again reflects the dull, dispassionate nature of the relationship. Your eyes on me were as eyes that rove over tedious riddles of years ago. It's interesting the use of the word rove, especially at the end of a line. So rove means to wander or to move away, but in the context of relationships, people often refer to a roving eye, suggesting infidelity, suggesting that somebody might be unfaithful. Positioning it at the end of the line almost invites the reader to think about what is coming next, and that perhaps that shock or suggestion of infidelity. We don't know for sure what happened in the relationship, but using the word rove in this context might point out to at least an untrustworthiness, if not unfaithfulness. The eyes in this poem are roving over tedious riddles of years ago. Hardy's narrator in this poem seems to be suggesting that this is a sense of boredom through the word tedious. This is something that has been playing out over a sense of years. It suggests a slow grudge building up. Some words played between us to and fro. I think that this suggests that there's no meaning behind the words, and it almost suggests there's a sense of detachment. There's a sense of them going through the motions of a conversation, but it feels personally like neither of them is listening to the other. And this makes them lose their love even more. Overall, in this poem, I think it seems like a dramatic and significant memory. It links to the landscape, which evokes strong negative emotions for Hardy. It's narrator. On the last slide, then, the smile on your mouth was the deadest thing. The juxtaposition between the smile and being dead is really interesting. It's not the way you'd normally expect a smile to be described. It makes the person he's speaking about seem fake. It makes them seem unhappy, which I would imagine they would be. And it makes them seem really sinister, that the smile is dead, but it's got enough strength to fade away even further. Deadest being a really interesting superlative for Hardy to choose. And a grin of bitterness swept thereby, and like an ominous bird a wing. These all contribute to a semantic field of resentment. The simile, like an ominous bird a wing, almost suggests that the smile is sinister, that it's hanging over him as if it's sort of ready to swoop down and to change the situation or to attack. And the ellipsis as well conveys that sense of threat almost in that last line. Since then, keen lessons that love deceives and rings with wrong have shaped to me your face and the God-cursed sun and a tree and a pond edged with greyish leaves. The idea that love deceives is a very pessimistic, unhappy viewpoint, and it's his enduring memory and lesson from this relationship. There's a change of time to note in this stanza. It jumps from the 3 stanzas previously, which have been describing a specific moment in quite a lot of detail. This jumps to what is happening at that present moment, the things he's learnt since that memory, which endows that memory with a certain importance, I think. The direct address, which I've drawn attention to in this stanza, but is also used throughout the poem, gives this, I believe, quite a personal feel. And It feels like it's being addressed to somebody particular. We don't know for sure whether it is, but it does feel quite personal and it feels quite important to the narrator of this poem. The structure of the poem is similarly quite neutral. It's very structured, it's got a regular rhyme scheme. The line lengths are regular and they reflect the monotony of the relationship. There's many unstressed sounds. So if you've done some work with your teachers or if you want to research, there's quite a lot of anapaests and dactyls in this poem. And there's frequent repetition of certain phrases as well. So there's anaphora of and at the beginning of lines, which suggests that he's just adding things as he thinks of them. And it again contributes to that sort of plodding, neutral tone.